There is simply no way they actually killed Hal Jordan in the first episode of Lanterns. There's absolutely no way. Going into Lanterns, I fully expected that Hal was very likely to die, considering the fact that Kyle Chandler is 60 years old and the DCU was very clearly setting up Aaron Pierre's John Stewart to be the main Green Lantern of the universe, as he is set to appear alongside Superman, Supergirl, and the Justice Gang in next year's Man of Tomorrow. Even with the expectation that Hal was very likely to die at some point within this series, I would have never guessed it would have been the cliffhanger of the very first episode. That is absolutely insane, and I gotta say props to HBO and the DCU for having the stones to do it, because that's one hell of a way to end your first episode and to tee up one hell of a mystery for the rest of the season. My mind is absolutely spinning with theories, and I'm just itching to see episode 2, but today I want to focus on the really solid episode 1 that we just got for Lanterns. Even though I don't think it's some game-changing episode of television, I thought it was a great way to set the foundation for the rest of the season to build off of, and if the rest of the season is similar in quality or perhaps even better, Lanterns has the potential to be special. One of the main reasons Lanterns has such high potential in my opinion is the fact that already in episode 1, I think it's becoming pretty clear that HBO and DC knocked it out of the park casting Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan and Aaron Pierre as John Stewart. Even though they are quite adversarial in episode 1, I think the chemistry is already shining through, and I just cannot wait to see more of each. Starting off with Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan, the first thing I want to say is I simply wish this dude was about 15 to 20 years younger, because I think he just has it and is a perfect choice for an older, rough around the edges, and kinda pissed off Hal Jordan. Like I've said in the past, I totally get being against the idea of an older Hal Jordan, because personally, I'm also against the idea when you just look at it on a sheet of paper, and when you think about the larger DCU as a whole. Hal Jordan is not only one of the best Green Lanterns in my eyes and the eyes of many, but he's simply one of the best characters in all of DC Comics. He is a character that I personally think should have been a pillar for the DCU, alongside the likes of John Stewart and Guy Gardner for years to come. And sure, is it possible that perhaps Hal is still a very large part of the DCU for years to come if they do something like Rebirth? Sure. Never say never, but until that is clearly presented to me as a possibility in the show or a movie or by James Gunn himself, I simply refuse to get my hopes up, and I cannot lie, I'm honestly disappointed in what the DCU decided to do with Hal in the long run. But I was still very excited to see what Lanterns was and to see what the DCU version of Hal would be, because I thought DC and HBO put together an absolutely loaded creative team with the likes of Chris Mundy and Damon Lindelof, and when it comes to characters in TV or movies, it's not like they need to be around for a certain amount of projects to be good. There have been so many characters who only appear in one movie or one season of television who have gone on to be iconic, so I was holding out hope that even though Hal wouldn't be around for long, he would be great in his limited time and make his mark felt on the DCU, and after one episode, I certainly won't declare that Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan is iconic or great yet, but goddamn do I love what we're getting so far. For some, I'm sure Hal is a bit too much of an asshole and curses a bit too much, which if that's the case for you, I am not telling you how to fan. That is a completely reasonable opinion to have, as this is not a typical characterization of Hal, and I understand if people are not fans of the massive changes made to the character, but I absolutely love it so far. Even when he is trying to be a hard ass, Kyle Chandler is too charismatic for me not to like him. And even though this is clearly a Hal that has been through a lot and lost his way a bit, you still see flashes of the confidence, charm, and of course arrogance that feels much more like the Hal Jordan many people love from the comics. One scene that kinda made me pissed off in somewhat of a funny and good way was the scene with John talking to the consciousness of Hal from his ring. Kyle Chandler de-aged a bit without any of the gray, looks like a picture perfect 40-year-old Hal Jordan, and damn it, I just kinda wish they made Kyle play a bit younger of a Hal who could still be older than John, but partners for years to come. But of course, that is not the world we live in, so there's no sense dwelling on that idea because that's not the story they wanted to tell. Before we get more into the story and mystery, I absolutely need to stop and say, of course, that Aaron Pierre is absolutely excellent as John. But I honestly think that comes as no surprise to anyone. Over the last almost 2 years since it was announced that Pierre and Chandler were cast as John and Hal respectively, there has obviously been a lot of discourse surrounding Chandler as Hal, but it feels like Pierre was one of the few comic book castings where almost everyone in unison said, yeah, that absolutely makes a lot of sense as soon as it was announced. Of course, like anything, there were people who were not on board with the casting, which is completely understandable, but I, like many others, was immensely excited by the idea due to the fact that Aaron Pierre was absolutely phenomenal in Rebel Ridge, and it just seemed like he was an up-and-coming star and the exact type of actor that was destined to be a part of something like Marvel or DC eventually, and in the long run, I think DC is going to be very happy that they were the ones to offer him a role, because as his popularity increases, it's only going to help a DC brand that absolutely needs all the help it can get, as James Gunn and Peter Safran attempt to revive a brand that a lot of people honestly associate with shitty movies and TV, be, unless the story is set in Gotham. However, placing the greater brand building to the side for now, I thought Pierre absolutely shined in episode 1. He has the gravitas and screen presence a more quiet and reserved character like Jon Stewart demands to work in live action. Pierre is basically a superhero built in a lab, as he looks like he should be playing Superman while also having the voice that could easily work for a character like Batman, and that combination emanates power just when Jon is standing there. Even though we are still missing a lot of the key details as to why the Guardians chose Jon specifically to take the ring after Hal in the DCU, once we see Jon on screen for the first time, you can easily kind of just look at him and say, yeah, he'd probably be a pretty great hero, and that of course is without all of the backstory for Jon, which gives context as to why he is so damn good at his job. For the story itself though, this idea of Jon being selected to replace Hal just provides such a fun dynamic for the writers to work with. Don't get me wrong, I love when Hal and Jon are true partners in the comics, as I think they complement each other very well, but I'm truly glad in the DCU they are not perfect partners right out of the gate, because I love seeing these two bicker back and forth. Of course, as the season goes on, there's probably a pretty good chance that these two characters are going to grow a bit closer and become much better partners, but I'm in no rush to get there right now. Some of the interactions between the two have been comedic in nature, like at the beginning when Hal is trying his best to rattle Jon and get him to react, and there's a great discussion about Jon and the use of the word sir, but these verbal spats between the two also lead to some really great discussions about how things should properly be handled, being chosen versus earning something, and overall the tension between the two just makes for damn good television, and I am fascinated to see how the show is going to handle something like making Jon the main Green Lantern of the DCU, while also giving Hal the proper respect he deserves. I will admit though, Hal was pushing it a bit in this episode. Don't get me wrong, I love Chandler in the role so far, and I understand why Hal would have some negative feelings about training his replacement, but the way Hal was talking down to Jon was reaching a point of disrespect that can make Hal come off a bit too much like an asshole, but I think at least in episode 1, that didn't cross the line, and I'm glad Jon threw some barbs back at Hal. But now let's talk a bit more about the story itself. There will be plenty of time dedicated in future episodes to praise both Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler a lot more. Outside of selling us on these versions of Hal and Jon, the number one priority of episode 1 for a murder mystery show is to sell us on the mystery, and I think this episode absolutely accomplishes that. I am sure for some this episode was a bit too grounded, as even though we know there are aliens in this rural Nebraska town, we only ever see them in human form, and there is very little action with the ring, but I think especially for an episode 1, that's completely justifiable. As we've seen in the trailers, there is plenty of ring slinging coming in the future, as well as off-planet activity. This episode clearly seemed like an attempt by HBO to present Lanterns in a very similar way to many of their other insanely popular shows, like Task and True Detective, in an effort to hopefully attract some more of their own core audience to a show who may not know anything about the Green Lantern Corps. And in theory, I honestly think that's a really smart way to do it, and that's also kind of why I love starting with the Green Lantern Corps on TV, as with the additional time you get in a show compared to a movie, you're just able to provide a lot more detail, build slowly, and also get a lot more time with the characters. Now, whether or not starting grounded and building to something more cosmic is actually something that'll be needle moving and work out in the long run, we will need to see the viewership numbers as the season goes on, but I understood the process, and I thought the more grounded approach was balanced with enough action and cosmic lore to satisfy comic fans in this first episode. Now, when it comes to the mystery itself, if you've watched my past videos, you know, first off, I'm awful at making predictions, as I simply cannot make up my mind, and I always second guess myself, so if you're looking for me to nail down what exactly is ahead, I sadly am not the guy for that. But after one episode, I'll admit, I do think my mind definitely drifts a bit more towards something like Blackest Night. To be clear, that is a gut feeling from me. I am not trying to predict anything because we did not get a whole lot of detail to go off of or anything specific to the aliens' motives and the goals, but for whatever reason, I just kept getting Secret Origin vibes from some of the stuff surrounding the death of Abensur, as well as the quote from Hal Jordan on 60 Minutes regarding the death of his father, which is literally almost word for word from that comic. Obviously, the real answer is it's probably going to be some sort of amalgamation of a bunch of different comic storylines, so I think it's probably quite dumb of me to just specifically focus in on one thing like Secret Origin, but when I look at the show, it definitely gives me the vibe that they might want to set up Blackest Night for the future, but also it's really hard to deny that the chance of Parallax being the main villain is also right in your face as well, as we have this older version of Hal who is really rough around the edges. He has yellow on his goddamn ring. It's hard to really make any declaration as of right now with the little information that we have to go off of, but I think this is a clear sign that episode 1 accomplishes exactly what it should. It has me asking a bunch of questions about what could potentially be coming in the future for season 1. Also, one thing about Hal, like I said earlier, I do expect him to die by the end of the series, but I have a feeling that there's a very high chance that the dead Hal that we see at the end of the episode is probably not the actual actual Hal Jordan. Now, why is Hal perhaps faking his death? I'm not sure, but for a show that is very clearly featuring shapeshifters, I'm sure there will be plenty of twists ahead, and the quote-unquote death of Hal Jordan in 2026 is probably one of them. There's of course the special mystery of the aliens in the shooting, but I think Rushville itself also was immensely intriguing and I thought well established. Kelly MacDonald is absolutely great in this episode, and her chemistry with both John and Hal is absolutely great right off the bat. We don't get a whole lot of anyone else in the town, but I thought the stuff with the McComm family was very eerie and creepy as well. Dillahunt's character is doing his best to appeal to Hal, claiming that he's concerned about planetary safety, but obviously there is a lot that he is hiding, and I cannot wait to find out who he is working for, and I think that speaks to what the episode did so well. There are so many unique rabbit holes of mystery to be explored in future episodes. There's the death of Hal. Who are the aliens in Rushville? Why is John selected by the Guardians specifically? Who is the McComm family working for? Plus there is so much more of course that we know from the trailers. Now it's up to the show to follow through on those mysteries and give them a proper payoff, and I could understand if some believe that maybe there's a bit too many doors open, but I think it's a great problem to have on a episode 1. Oh, one other major highlight of the episode was the interrogation scene. I will tell you right now, that is the best scene that the DCU has put out so far. I know it's not a whole bunch of a project, so that's maybe not saying a whole lot, but I was absolutely captivated by that interrogation. And again, Kyle Chandler is just so amazing in this role. I will say right now, I'm not sure how the rest of season 1 is going to go. It's very possible that the rest of the season is not able to pay off some of the mysteries presented within episode 1, and maybe it loses some of its focus as it expands to feature more of the cosmos and great Green Lantern lore. But as long as the show keeps the spotlight on Pierre and Chandler, I like its odds because I feel like they struck gold with both. We may not be getting them together for a very long time, so enjoy it while it lasts. However, now I want to know, what did you think of Lanterns episode 1? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video.